This video on gathering data on the mental factor. Today we're going to talk about gathering data or collecting data or gathering information, and we're going to focus on the mental factor. We're going to look at two different methods, the performance profile wheel or PPW and the mental toughness questionnaire or MTQ. Some common questions you may get asked in your higher PE exam are to identify a method of collecting information or data on the mental factor. You need to know an example of an analytical tool that may be used to collect information on the mental factor, an example of a recognised test that may be used to collect information on the mental factor, and you need to be comfortable with describing this method and how it was used to collect information on the mental factor. You may also be asked to explain why you selected this method, usually as a follow-up question, or explain why this method was appropriate. And lastly, you may be asked to analyse how suitable or how effective this method was at collecting information on mental factors. So there's two main methods of data collection that we're going to talk about today, the mental toughness questionnaire and the PPW. The first one that we're going to look at is the mental toughness questionnaire, which is a recognised test, and it helps to find out our level of mental toughness. So, how do we complete this questionnaire? Well, the mental toughness questionnaire is a double-sided sheet of A4, and it has 30 statements on it, and a performer will complete these statements by ticking true or false, and it's all to do with how they respond to challenging situations within a performance. This can be completed before a performance, or it can be completed after a performance. The 30 statements are split into 5 different sections that relate to different mental aspects such as concentration, rebound ability, and motivation. The performer will then tick yes or no as to whether or not they agree with the statement or whether or not they disagree with the statement. Once they've completed all the questions, they're then going to turn the page over and they're going to mark their answers. For some of these statements you'll get 1 point, and for others you'll get no points, which will then give you a score out of 6 if you compare it to the marking criteria, and at the end you'll get a score out of 30, and you can compare this to a model performer and to norms. On screen just now is an example of a description and how you would write a descriptive answer for the mental toughness questionnaire. Pause the video here to see that in more detail. We're now going to talk about the performance profile wheel, and this can be used to collect data on any factor. The sub-factors which you write around the outside will change depending on whether or not it is mental, emotional, social, or physical. In this case, it's for the mental sub-factor, so you would write the mental sub-factors around the outside, and you would complete both sides of the double-sided sheet of A4. It's also important to note that this test is an analytical tool, so if you are asked to identify or describe an analytical tool for the mental factor, this is the one to write about. So, what is the performance profile wheel? As we've said, it's a double-sided sheet of A4 with 2 wheels on each side. Each wheel has got 8 segments, and you would write the mental sub-factors around the outside, such as concentration, mental toughness, decision-making, and so on. Each section of the wheel is split from 1 to 10. You'll rate yourself from 1 to 10 for each sub-factor, and you'll shade up from the middle. A score of 1 is an area of weakness, and a score of 10 is an area of strength, and you'll try and pinpoint where you are on that spectrum. You complete the first wheel, the wheel on the left-hand side here, based upon your own performance, and you rate yourself for each of the sub-factors from 1 to 10. You then move on to the second wheel, and you would then compare a model performer from a sport of your choice. You would then hand the PPW to your coach, and he would then complete the wheel on the other side of the paper, the wheel that you can see, the third wheel here. He would then rate your own mental skills, and then he would rate a model performer for each of the mental sub-factors. On screen just now is an example description for the PPW. Again, pause the video here to have a look at this answer in more detail. We're now going to look at reasons for using these methods, and if you'd like to see a more in-depth video, please go and have a look at the suitability of a method video on my YouTube channel and how you can use the PAR VM structure to answer this question. We're now going to consider how we might analyse or evaluate the effectiveness of the mental toughness questionnaire and the PPW. And to do this, we need to consider the benefits of using these methods, but also the limitations of using these methods. So what are some benefits of using the mental toughness questionnaire to collect information on mental factors? Well, firstly, this is completed by yourself, and you know yourself and your mental skills better than anyone else. The mental toughness questionnaire also gives you a score which we can keep and compare back to in future, and we can also compare this to the table of norms at the bottom of the mental toughness questionnaire. Moving on now to the PPW. Again, this is completed by you, and you know yourself and your own mental skills better than anyone else, so you're in the best position to rate your own performance. The results here are easy to interpret. All we have to do is count up how many boxes we've scored ourselves out of 10, and you can select the sub-factors that you would like to rate yourself on by changing what you write around the outside. This method can also be used in different locations, which makes it attractive, and it's a benefit of using it. And we can also get our coach to check our answers to ensure that we're not being too harsh on ourselves or that we're not being biased. Some limitations for using the mental toughness questionnaire. Well, because it's completed by yourself, you may be too harsh on yourself. You might tick true when actually you should tick false. You may not understand what some of the statements or some of the words in the mental toughness questionnaire are, and you should make sure that your teacher or coach reads through this with you so that you fully understand all of these statements before answering. And if we do this in a busy environment where there is other people around, you may also be influenced by other people as you're concerned about them seeing your answers. And moving on now to the limitations of the PPW. Again, you can be too harsh on yourself. You need to complete this on your own so that we're not being influenced by others. It's important that we get it checked by somebody else, ideally your coach. And also it's important that you compare yourself to a realistic model performer from analyse the effectiveness of this method for collecting data on the mental factor using the 3-step process. It is important to complete the PPW honestly. This means that the performer can rate their mental skills out of 10 and honestly reflect upon their performance. This leads to the data gathered being valid because they can accurately reflect on whether the sub-factor is a strength or a weakness. So remember, because this is an analyse question, we're going to give an example, we're going to identify something, we're then going to give the implication, so what does this mean for you as a performer, and we're then going to look at what is the impact this has on the data being gathered. And lastly, it's important the performer reads through the mental toughness questionnaire with their coach before completing it. This means that the performer can ask their coach about what any of the statements mean, and if they're unsure, they can ask questions. And this leads to the performer being able to complete the questionnaire correctly and accurately. Hope you found this video useful for gathering data on the mental factor. There's more content like this on my YouTube channel. Thank you.